Have you ever stood there at the edge of the pond wondering what the heck that duck is? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods talking about nature right outside your front door. Well, now is a great time to look at ducks. Ducks are coming in, some of the ducks that have overwintered with us. And you know what? We look at a lot of ducks and we think we should be able to name them. And instead, we just sit there and go blank. That has been my experience many times. This last weekend, it was a huge crane, goose, duck migration in. And we saw a lot of ducks that don't overwinter in my neck of the woods and just started flocking in from everywhere. And it was pretty amazing. And I went to a number of different places and saw a huge variety of ducks. But they get kind of hard at times when you're sitting there trying to identify them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I mean, you have some obvious ones out there, right? The male mallards. They always are very easily recognizable. You know, the idea with their color green or purple heads, very easy to look at. But sometimes, even in the female mallard ducks, they don't really stick out. You might see a little red head here or there. You might see this patch of brown or this little sploosh of green going on. You might see that they're diving or they're just sort of scuttling around. Sometimes identifying ducks can be very, very difficult for us. And ducks are kind of fun. You know, it wasn't my first area where I looked at when I first started getting into birding. But now I'm starting to get my a feel of ducks. I'm starting to be able to identify ducks pretty clearly. But if you're not good at identifying ducks, there's nothing wrong with you. They sometimes can be kind of difficult. So we're going to kind of start off a little bit of a series about birds that tend to fool you and how you can tell some of them apart. Like I said, I learned about ducks sort of later in my birding experience just because they can be very difficult. They don't just even fool you with their colors, but they can kind of hide a little bit of their shape and their pattern or behaviors. So sometimes color can be a real trap for us when we go to a pond and we're looking for an outright color. We see what color the head is, or we're looking at the color on the wings. And it's a starting point for most of us when we're trying to identify ducks, but sometimes it's a very misleading one. Why? Because sometimes the colors change. Sometimes the lighting is bad and either we can't see the color or the light just looks differently with the angle of the sun. Sometimes colors change by season and it can be even quite dramatic. And sometimes the color is different between male and female. The female mallard is a solid female brown pintail duck. And if you're going for color right there, you're probably going to get her wrong quite often. Shape doesn't lie. You know, a duck's head stays a consistent pattern. It has a similar silhouette throughout the entire year. Even brown females with texture, with color, looks the same as the males when it comes to their shape. Behavior too. You know, the idea is that whether a duck dives or it tips up or skims the surface, it basically can be used to narrow our options really very quickly. So that's what we're going to hold on to this. When we look at head shape, body shape, pattern, and behavior, that's going to be our toolkit. So like I said, if we look at ducks and our mind goes blank, I want to kind of give you a strategy for how you can identify ducks a little bit better. The first tip is look for pairs. Ducks very often travel in pairs or travel in small groups. And for the most part, species kind of hang out with each other. So oftentimes I will get the male duck identified quickly. Oh, there's a mallard. Oh, but then there's this little brown duck following it. You know what? Chances are it's probably the female mallard duck, right? So sometimes the male can offer us a key to what the female is or what that other duck is. So look to see if is a pair of ducks traveling together. Chances are they're the same species. And if you can identify one of them, you've identified the other one of them. The other idea, like I said, is ducks like company. They tend to hang out in groups of their own kind. And sometimes there's 20 of the same-ish looking birds in a pond, and there's your mystery bird. You know, so the idea is that if you can kind of zero in on a couple individuals and identify them, maybe it will help you identifying the whole little group of them. Not always. Sometimes they mix it up a little bit, but it helps quite a bit. Then the next question is the bird, is it diving, which means it goes up and then goes down again? Is it just tipping its tail up in the air and dunking its head there? Is it barely moving? Is it it completely, submarining and going down it vertically? That's the idea. Is there's different kinds of ducks. There's divers, there's dabblers, and they don't overlap. So usually when you can see the pattern that they're doing, that will give you a huge clue as to what kind of duck you're seeing. Pied-billed grebes sort of sink like a submarine, while diving ducks will, like I said, jump and sploosh down like loons and dive down deep and go into full, 10 minutes under the water kind of thing. So that's the idea, is what behavior do you see? And then, like I said, if you don't stream exactly right back into the details, just kind of step back a little bit mentally. What's the bird's overall shape? Is it big or small? Does it have a compact beak or a very stretched out beak? Does it have a long neck or a short neck? Does it have a high back or is the back flat? Does it have tail feathers or no tail feathers? But before you look at the color, like the tail colors, the breast color, the wing patches, first try to identify what exactly does this duck look like beyond the colors. Okay, so it's okay now, like I said, if you want to stop early in your duck identification, because you might not be able to identify them entirely. So, for example, you might look at a duck and say, I know it's a scaup. I'm just not sure if it's a greater or lesser. Or I know it's a teal, but I don't know if it's a blue-winged teal or a cinnamon teal or a green-winged teal, right? That's okay. You're getting better, and that's how I started in the whole duck identification, is for a while I got ducks mixed up, but I tried to get them at least within their same family. At least I knew this was a teal or this was a scaup. I didn't know which one, but I knew that it was. That's okay too, right? So let's talk about some very confusing ducks. And boy, I can tell you that I had a lake that I was looking at, thousands of swans and geese, white-fronted geese, cackling geese, Canada goose, or geese, right? Hundreds of cranes flying overhead, and probably, several dozen ducks. The ducks weren't quite back yet, but some of them, just because we were exposed to just a few of them, still were rather confusing. So first there's three, and one is called a canvasback, the other's a redhead, and here's the way that you can tell them apart. Sometimes when you're looking at them, they can be very confusing. You see a duck with a red head sitting out there in the water, and your brain first starts out going, redhead, because it has a red head. But when you look at it more carefully, you actually might be looking at a canvasback, because it comes down to a differently shaped head entirely. The canvasback has a long, sloped forehead that runs almost in a straight angle from the tip of the beak all the way to the end of the bill. And it looks very aerodynamic. But the redhead, on the other hand, has a very rounded head, more like a dome, looks a little bit friendlier almost, and that shape of the head will help you do it. So like I said, canvasbacks look very aerodynamic, while redheads look very friendlier, I guess, in some ways, a little bit softer or more bubbly in it. So that's the idea. If you can look at the head shape, you don't have to look and worry about the color, the back panels, anything else like that. Sometimes it's really hard to see the color, especially when you're at a very long distance or low light. So again, the canvasback too is overall larger, has a longer neck, a heavier body, and the males have a striking white back on them. Now that we got into color, the shape works the same in females, even when the light is bad. So like I said, the forehead will help you every single time. When you're looking at mallards, like I said, mallards are usually easy to see because they have the very colorful head. But in some weird lights, you might not see the color of the duck very well, particularly if they're far out in the back of the lake. And they can get quite confused with the American black duck. And this one always will get people. So what you see, like I said, if you look at a female mallard, brown, streaky, out in the open, and then, I don't know what that is. The American black duck is overlapping in that range with the mallards in most of the United States, like east and the Midwest, and they're easy to miss if you're not really looking. And like I said, people will misidentify them as mallards off in a distance. But here's the difference with them. A mallard female is lighter overall. She has a lighter belly. She has a orange and black bill, which is finally a little bit streaky, and it's very identifiable. The American black duck, however, is a little bit darker, is more uniformly dark. But here's the key. The bill itself is either a dark olive or a greenish yellow. There's no orange in it. So that is how I always get to tell mallards. Mallards have that striking orange duck. But it's kind of your whole clue there. The black duck also has a tendency to look a little bit more uniform, a little less patchy. And if you can see the wings in flight, then there is an iridescent patch that is purple on the back of a black duck. And the mallard has a blue-green patch. So that's another really good way where you can tell them apart. But like I said, if you're sort of seeing something and you're not quite sure what it is, these are some good ways that you can take a look at it. Female ducks, I'll tell you, in honesty, are very difficult at times. Identification can be very hard because many of them look like brown ducks. Brown ducks all over the place. And they're brown with some brown and more brown with a little streak of brown, and then maybe another color of brown in there too. And your brain just is like, oh, I don't know what it is. I gave up on a lot of female ducks when I was very new in the bird watching. Your brain just kind of shuts down. But like I said, you can start looking for different kinds of patterns, and they will help you with these female ducks. A lot of them, like I said, have different face patterns. They have a different shape of their bill. They have a different color of their bill. Sometimes they have an eye stripe, and that would be coming off the back of the eye. And sometimes they have patterns, or they just have just sort of a brown texture. Is that pattern scalloped? Is it streak, or is it very fine and detailed patterns? That's where it'll help you out. And that's where, like I said, birding gets real. You get the binoculars out. And if you get a little bit more observational and a little bit more careful, you'll be able to spot these brown female ducks, which is kind of a huge accomplishment. You know, sort of the flashy male ducks are easier to spot. But when you learn the female ones, that means you're paying attention there and you're starting to get good at this. But let me tell you, the bird that I always get really kind of mixed up in all of this is the gadwall. And this is the one that I always get mixed up with female birds all the time. So for a while, I can't say how long it was, I was, I'd look at a mallard and I'd say, okay, fine, it's probably a mallard. But then all of a sudden I would sort of see, it looked like a female mallard, but it was a little bit more mysterious than that. I saw a very deep textured pattern in the duck itself. The male is gray from a distance, but up close it almost looks like an intricately scalloped pattern on it. This herringbone fabric of feathers that you see. And it's very distinctive with a little bit of a black patch towards the rear. That's the idea. The female gadwall is brown, just like the other brown birds, but they are that same detailed texture. They're very pretty. It's a very pretty pattern. And the female mallard is a little bit more all over the place. It's not quite as defined as a pattern. So in this particular case, you might even see like a white wing patch in flight if you see them. But that's where you have to start, like I said, identifying them. It's very easy to get gadwalls really messed up with many female ducks. But once you see that very beautiful pattern on them, you'll be able to start picking them out all the time. Gadwalls are easy to ignore, but when you start seeing how beautiful they are and how intricate their pattern is, you'll never really forget it. Now, if we talk about teals are another kind of interesting look at them. Teals are a lot of, I don't know, people think of them as sort of like a chaos bird. They're very small. You don't even realize how small they are. They travel very fast. They flush out easily, meaning that if they were like, let's say you're walking along a path and they were sort of on the side of the waterway, like on the edge of the water, inside the water, they're very skittish. And so they'll just suddenly zoom out of there. They'll either swim very fastly or they will fly out of the reeds that they're in. They're sort of a blink and you miss it kind of birds, but they're very skittish, probably because they're so little. But we have three main species that we kind of generally think of when we're talking about birds in the Midwest of the United States. Is there are blue-winged teals. And when you first look at them, there's a blue patch on their forewing, and it's very distinctive. The male has a white crescent in front of the eye, and the female is a very standard brown with the teal. The green-wheeled teal is even smaller than the blue-winged teal. They are the smallest dabbling duck in North America. The male has a very rich chestnut head with a green stripe through the eye, and the female has a nondescript brown. But she's also very, very tiny. That size gives away teals very often. The cinnamon teal is kind of the exciting one. That's the one we see less of. I see a lot of blue-wing and green-wheeled teals in the Midwest, but the cinnamon teals, they have a striking reddish coloring on the male. They are mostly a Western species, but we get them every once in a while here in the Midwest. And so when we do get them, it's kind of an exciting thing. The speed and size of the teal will tell you that you're in teal territory again, because they are very, very small. And so you kind of want to take that moment so that you can identify them. But those are the three teals that you have. The scaup, boy, I can't even begin to tell you. I cannot identify lesser versus greater scaups. They're hard to ID because sometimes when you look at a scaup, the greater scaup and the lesser scaup look almost identical. They both have blue bills. They both dive. They both tend to show up in big flocks in open water. And the head shape is right there, subtle enough that you, an experienced birder, sometimes can give up and just say, oh, it's a scaup. I don't know what it is. But let's just talk a little bit about the differences between them. If you're looking at a diving duck with a blue bill and a rounded body in open water, you got a scaup. That's it right there. That's a solid ID. But if you try to push harder into it and try to identify whether it's a lesser or greater scaup, you can generally sometimes you just can't tell. You hope you do, but you want to give yourself permission to sometimes just say scaup. But essentially, the differences are very hard, and it's very hard to become accurate at it. But like I said, yeah, give yourself a little bit of grace on that. The bufflehead and common goldeneye, these are two birds that I often get confused myself. We had a number of goldeneyes here in spring. It was a big goldeneye year for us. And buffleheads are really fantastic. They're one of my favorite ducks that I see, in a November pond. They're both black and white. They both disappear underwater constantly. They're diving ducks. And so that means if you see it, you have to be patient and wait for them to come back up. But buffleheads are very tiny. They are seriously one of the tiniest diving ducks we have out there. The males have an oversized looking head that looks big compared to the rest of its body, with a sweeping white patch that wraps around its entire back, almost like he's wearing a white hoodie. And it almost is like a ping pong ball with wings, essentially. The common goldeneye is noticeably larger. It's a full-size duck. The male is distinctive white over the base of its bill and has a glossy green head. And it has a very boldly patterned white and black body. And so you can easily see. So like I said, keep in mind, the bufflehead is like a ping pong ball. The goldeneye is a full-size duck, that has a pattern on him. In this case, it's going to be size is your best separator here. So if you see a diving duck and is noticeably small with a round head and a big white patch, you got a bufflehead. If it's larger, chunkier, with a white spot near its face, like kind of there, you got a goldeneye. And both female species are brown and white. But the size difference is what's going to tell you which one you have. One of my favorite ducks that we have out there are called mergansers. And sometimes when you look at them, they look like a rock and roll duck. Because mergansers are kind of like punk rock. They are very long and low in the water. They have a very thin serrated bill, so it's not flat, rounded like what you picture in most ducks. They sort of look like little prehistoric there. But here's the interesting thing is that the mergansers will have kind of a rock and roll spiky hairdo. They really are quite distinctive. So essentially, the common merganser is large, cleanly patterned. The male has a bright white body, dark green head, and has a very long red bill. It's very, very striking. While the female, it has a chestnut brown head with a shaggy crest and a white chin. Like I said, and when the mergansers either notice something or they'll put up their little spiky heads, and like I said, it's very rock and roll. The red-breasted mergansers are similar, but they're a little bit messier. They look a little bit more disheveled. Their crest, their rock and roll haircut is more disheveled. It's more uneven. It's rusty, and it is stays up. And they look like kind of like they stayed up too late last night. They kind of look a little bit more messy if you know what it is. So then you can kind of identify which of the mergansers you have. You'll easily spot them. Like I said, they sort of have a distinctive shape. They have that crest that kind of flies off in the back, and then every once in a while they put it up. But you'll notice that thin, distinctive bill, that they're usually moving with a lot of purpose. They're always out there hunting. And so trying to get whether you have a common merganser or you have a red-breasted merganser will help you identify which ones you have. So I hope that you got a chance to meet a couple of ducks this time around. And you don't have to memorize them, and you don't have to learn how to ID them all at once. But the idea is that if you walk up to a pond, you can kind of give a quick glance, look at the head shape, the body shape, the patterns, and a bit of the behavior. And then the color is a bonus that will already help you confirm, probably from the shape, that you've already learned about this particular duck. And if you get stuck, like I said, look for pairs, look for crowds. I use an app that is only available on Apple, and it is called Birds Near Me. And it uses the eBird data. But what's nice about that is you can say, in this particular pond, what have other people seen? Because a lot of times when you're new to birding, it's hard to know what is out there. But chances are you're seeing what other people have seen. And so if you say, I think I see a common merganser out there, and then you look at the list and only people have seen red-breasted mergansers, probably that's what you're seeing too. Not every time, but it'll help you get a little bit closer and help you learn your ducks a little bit better. I'll give you one other kind of tip that I've done is I have asked ChatGPT in particular, because it can draw graphics and it can get things wrong. I have had to correct it many times. So what I'll do is I'll look at two comparisons of two different birds, and I'll say, create an image for me that shows a red-breasted merganser next to a common merganser. And that way I can see them in a graphic side by side. And you can see, oh, that one's big and this one's little. And anytime that I get two birds confused very often, like I do with Ross's goose versus snow geese, I will have ChatGPT draw me a comparison diagram so I can quickly flip it up and then look to see between the two of them. I hope that helps in identifying a lot of these ducks. It gets very exciting. Just start out with one or two, different species. Like get good at maybe the canvasback versus the redhead, or get good at the bufflehead versus the goldeneye. And then, a couple weeks from now, next year, you can pick another pair. But start learning them slowly, and that way you'll be able to enjoy, basically identify ducks wherever you go. Thanks so much. I appreciate you being out there. If you're watching this on video, you can comment in the chat channel. What kind of ducks are your favorite ducks? Appreciate you being out there, and have a great day.